is incredible. It's how it feels at the top. Got no incentive to stop. Payment is only the rock. So I take water and soda, then hit them with lyrics and mix them up all in the pot. While in the jungle, they won't be tame. Keep them alive but without a brain. They want me broke with a lot of fame. Smiling but he in a lot of pain. Till he tap out like a lot of names. You gotta give me what's owed. Taking control. No, this is not a game. No.
It's time now for another edition of Inside Notre Dame Men's Basketball, presented by TireRack.com. I'm your host, Tony Simeone, joined as always by the head coach, Mike Brey. Coach, it's been actually 2 weeks since we last talked in this environment, and since then, your team has gone 4-1. You've been playing great basketball. You're at the top of the ACC standings. How have you assessed your team's performance over the last couple of weeks?
Not a bad 2 weeks, huh, Tony? I just love our leadership. I love our mental toughness. I love our focus. To work through a jam-packed schedule because of some rescheduling, to absorb a punch that Duke gave us on a Monday night and bounce back with 3 more wins. Very proud of where we're at, and we're leading the league and we're chasing a regular season championship.
I want to follow up on that. At this time, you are at the top of the ACC standings at 10-3, a half game ahead of Duke. If we go back to Boston College on December 3rd, when you lost that first conference game on the road, I'm not sure anybody outside of the locker room thought that this position you're in right now was possible. How has your team been able to get there, and how proud are you of them to be sitting at the top of the standings at this point in the year?
Even some people inside that locker room were concerned about that, but there's always been a real good senior leadership group of Hub, Leshevsky, and Goodwin. And I would add Cormac Ryan, since he's been with us a while. Robby Carmody as a leader, even though he's not playing. That group kept pushing, kept dreaming, and I think felt there was a destiny to them after all they've been through in their younger years to be in the mix. When we went 3-1 in the league early, we started talking about, why don't we chase a regular season championship? So now that's become daily talk.
Coach, appreciate it. When we come back, we'll break down the last week in which Notre Dame went 4-1 in the ACC on this week's edition of Inside Notre Dame Men's Basketball, presented by TireRack.com. Welcome back to Inside Notre Dame Men's Basketball, presented by TireRack.com. It's now time for this week's game breakdown. Coach, we're going to start with the game all the way back a couple weeks ago against Virginia. When you think back to that, Virginia was coming in as a team you guys really had not had a lot of regular season success against. They're always really well coached, play a great, very stingy style of defense. Approaching that game, what was your message to the team to get ready for them?
Well, we definitely wanted to snap that streak. Virginia's kind of owned us, as they've had many teams in our league. And I thought we were really mentally prepared to play them. It's a slow pace. They're a great defensive group, as you mentioned. I thought our defense, was fabulous, guarding different kind of stuff. Our mixing in of zone helped us. And we were able, maybe for the first time in a while, to get into a little better offensive rhythm against Virginia's defense.
Let's talk about some of the offensive performances in the first half. It was Blake Wesley with 10 points, Paul Atkinson with 12 that really paced you early. The two of them have played really well, I think, this year, and also in the first half. They seem to give you some nice juice to start the games. What did you see from them that put you in that position that let you execute the way you were talking about?
Both of those guys being new to this whole Virginia thing, maybe there was no mental block, and they just kind of played. But you're right, both Blake and Paul have jump-started us many times offensively to start games.
At halftime, you play in Virginia. I just always am curious about what the message is in the locker room, because you were playing well in the first half, but you know that they're going to come and give you something in the second half. When you had that lead at halftime, what was the discussion like in the locker room?
I think our group is really mature to self-talk before I even get in there. 20 more minutes. We got to keep it up. How do we start the second half? And in ACC play, as we've witnessed, when you have leads, usually teams are going to make a run. And then are you poised enough to handle it and hold them off? And our group has shown they can do that, and we had to do that again against Virginia.
In the second half, you did extend the lead to 15. Dane Goodwin came alive, Nate Leshevsky. I thought the ball was moving really well. You mentioned the offensive execution, but specifically in the second half, seemed like the ball was just flowing for you guys. What did you like from the way your team was executing offensively in the second half that allowed you to extend that lead?
Well, when we limit our dribbles, Tony, and what we've done with our offense, and we swing it to the second and third side, in other words, reverse the ball a couple times, we have learned that we can get some really good stuff. We also have a really good passing group. And when you have two big guys like Leshevsky and Atkinson who can pass, it really helps your offense flow.
I think the most exciting thing about that win was that it gave you a ton of momentum going into the Monday night game against Duke. It was a quick turnaround, just a couple days, but there was a ton of juice in the building. You had a chance to play for first place in the conference on a huge national stage. Before we get to the game itself, I just want to know, because we talked before, what was it like to be in preparation mode for that game and have that team that you coach on that big stage in that moment?
Well, the neat thing about that build-up, there was a build-up about it, there was hype about it, and maybe in a lot of ways it distracted us a little bit and put some pressure on us, because now here it comes, and we kind of played that way, I thought, a little bit. I thought our defense was good enough, but man, we weren't anywhere near who we could be offensively, and you got to give Duke credit. They came in and really guarded us. But I've loved not only the Duke game, but our fans have really, and our student section have really had our backs and help us believe in our building.
So the best guy to talk about as we transition to Miami is Dane Goodwin, because the Duke game was something we haven't seen from him all year. He wasn't in double figures, and on top of that, he was a goose egg. He just did not have it offensively against Duke. They played some great defense against him. We talked about him going into the Miami game. You were pretty confident this guy was going to flush that one against Duke and come out and perform against Miami. He gave you 11 first half points against the Hurricanes. So what impressed you about Dane's bounce back?
Knowing Dane as an older player and a veteran guy, actually on Tuesday, we laughed about it, and to loosen him up. And I said, look, you'll be back, relax. He said, I'm good, coach. And again, he's a competitive dude. He's got an edge about him. And I was fully confident that he would get back in a rhythm, and he did at Miami.
You get the win to move to 8-3, and at that point, you're tied with Miami in the ACC. Now you're really alive for the conference regular season title. After the game, just what was your takeaway and message to the team?
Well, they were really excited. And I wanted to reiterate, it just shows the kind of character you have to be able to bounce back in a short window after a tough night on Monday. And I said, now, if you really want to have character, we get this other one before we go home, and darn if we didn't.
Coach, we'll talk about that one after a break on this week's edition of Inside Notre Dame Men's Basketball, presented by TireRack.com. Welcome back to Inside Notre Dame Men's Basketball, presented by TireRack.com. It's now time to continue this week's game breakdown with the coach, Mike Brey. Let's look at last week's games. First, NC State. You go on the road to Raleigh. This is the first time you played a team for the second time in a season this year, so I'm always curious, when you're preparing for a team that's already seen you, what do you have to be mindful of going into that situation?
You try not to overanalyze. You watch a little bit of your game before and what helped you, but you also know you got to be ready for a little bit of everything, and teams change. And I thought, we were able to get some rest in Miami on Thursday, roll into Raleigh on Friday, tune it up a little bit, and we get off to a great start. We were very ready to play.
Let's talk about that start. You guys went up 19-3. I think you held NC State to one of their first 13 from the floor. We've talked about defense, but now we can really focus on it. The last 6 games, you've held opponents to 65 points or less. The start defensively against NC State was fabulous. What were you seeing on the defensive end?
Just great position, great help, great blockouts, one and done. And what it helped us do for the first time to start a game, we had so many stops in a row, we were able to run. And we were able to get down the floor, and we got easy buckets early in transition, and our tempo overall is a little slower, but that doesn't mean when we get a defensive rebound and we have a numbers advantage, we don't want to take advantage. But it kept coming up over and over again, and probably the best game defensively we've started.
I want to ask one follow-up about rebounding, because every time I get to a gym and watch this team take the floor, I look on the other side and I see, man, this team's size, it would suggest that they're going to get out-rebounded. And you guys have rebounded really well the entire year against some really good rebounding teams. So talk to me about how your team rebounds as a team, because you've mentioned Cormac Ryan will fly in for 7 rebounds in a game. Your guards hit the glass well. It seems like a real team effort, but I want to know, how do they get it done?
Yeah, I think our guard rebounding, starting with the Kentucky game where we made that a big emphasis, has helped us. But Leshevsky and Atkinson together really do a good job controlling the backboard, especially the last 7-8 minutes of a game. They're really good at knowing, now we got to get every miss and people can't get putbacks. Of course, Paul's been a little bit on his own here the last 2, and he's done a yeoman's job getting 15 rebounds the other night against Louisville.
So it was a great road trip. You win both games. You're 9-3. Then I'm sure whether you were watching online or you're watching on the phone, you saw Monday night's result where Virginia beats Duke at Cameron. So now you wake up knowing, okay, on Wednesday when Louisville comes to town, if we win, we're going to be at the top of the standings. If only for a day, maybe it'll be longer, who knows, but you have a chance to have first place by yourself. Did that give you any added emphasis going into the game against Louisville on Wednesday?
Well, when Beekman's shot went in against Duke, I'm thinking to myself, man, our karma is pretty good right now. The skies are opening, the seas are parting. Let's see if we can take advantage. And, you know, we knew we had a bit of a wounded Louisville team coming in with all the changes they've had and a suspension and a guy back in the lineup. But Louisville still has personnel. People need them. And they've got 10 bodies that can really come at you. And they did.
They got 10 guys, like you said, that can score between 5 and 10 points. You guys, though, I thought did a great job in the opening half. Somebody we haven't talked about in the span of the 4-1 run you guys are on is Blake Wesley. He hasn't had the maybe most efficient offensive performance, but I thought in the first half against Louisville, he led you in scoring with 9 points, back to his old ways, 4 of 6, had that great back down where he really took advantage of a mismatch. The Blake we saw in the first half against Louisville feels like the guy we're going to maybe see going towards the postseason.
Yeah, and again, I think he's still been really playing well for us. Okay, he didn't score 22, he didn't score 23, but I think his shot selection has been better, so his percentages are better, and he's been able to get in the lane and find people and get to the basket and get fouled. And I think, especially to start a game, that's been my message. Just don't settle for jump shots. That doesn't mean you don't take great shots from 3, but you don't need to settle.
We talked about it at the start of the show, but to be at 10-3, we talked about it last night after the game as well. At the top of the standings for a team that's seen a lot of adversity, not just this year, but in prior years. What does that mean as a coach?
It's really neat. I was mentioning to somebody, Hub, Leshevsky, Goodwin, Carmody, when they were freshmen, they finished 15th in the league. Now there was 3 1 seeds in the league that year, but we invested in the young guys. They finished last. And for them to wake up this week and see the top of the standings, that's kind of cool for them. I hope they feel accomplished because they have been so coachable. They have been great kids, and they've chased this together.
Coach, appreciate it. We'll step aside and come back with more on this week's edition of Inside Notre Dame Men's Basketball, presented by TireRack.com. Welcome back to Inside Notre Dame Men's Basketball, presented by TireRack.com. It's now time for this week's edition of Irish Intel. Coach, when you look at this play here against Virginia, you're up 6. Dane Goodwin's going to knock down a 3 that really puts the game away at this point, but it starts with some great ball movement from your team.
Well, we're just good with the ball, and I think we sense big possessions. Paul Atkinson is very good with the ball right here because they're pressuring him, and he's smart with it. Nate's been good with it, too. And this is just a heck of a drive. And to be able to throw that left-handed around the defense, extra pass by Prentice, dagger by that guy who, senses the moment. Again, a mature group that understands the moment and understands we have to get a great one right here. And if we do, we put it away. There's only maybe one guy that can make that pass, left-handed around. Hub picks up a grounder, flips it underhanded, and then Dane with great poise here to get the guy in the air and kind of confidently sidestep and kick it in, and our bench is awesome over there.
So, Coach, this is in the final minute of the first half against NC State. You guys got off to a great start in this game. We're up 19-3 in the opening half. The offense is working for you. This is some great ball movement by your team.
Just great reads here out of the framework of our motion offense. Our bigs handling the ball up top with Paul. Great look by Prentice, the extra pass, calm with a shot fake, and we get it. There's just real good poise and calm feet through that possession. This is a great angle, by the way, to see it, but look at the read of the ball screen. We've got great spacing on the left side of the floor, great spacing. Prentice here, and instead of Paul going into all that traffic and maybe charging, this is the kind of play he's made. That's a great pass. Over the top right there. Just a big-time pass. And then watch Cormac's calm feet to attack the closeout. I'm going to get you up in the air. I'm going to take one dribble. Prentice is really feeling, you see his hand up, he's feeling the spacing. We've got good spacing with Dane and Trey as well. And just, that's going in because the possession was so good. Like when we have good possessions, and we move it like that, I bet you make 90% of those. Just beautiful basketball, playing together, sharing the ball, a group that really can pass the ball together.
Thanks, Coach. When we come back, we'll have this week's edition of Irishography on Inside Notre Dame Men's Basketball, presented by TireRack.com. So, Robby, the team's playing really well this year. You guys are at the top of the ACC standings as we speak right now. Just from your vantage point, what has been the biggest key to the success this season?
I think we've just been playing more within ourselves compared to the last couple years. We kind of just have a certain trust level with each other from being here for so long that we know that a guy is going to be able to go out and do what we need him to do no matter what. And that makes it easy to play and work in your role. So
I want to ask you about your role because you've been injured the last couple of years and have not been able to make it on the floor. So from your standpoint, how do you stay engaged and what kind of role do you serve for this team on the sidelines?
I see myself as a little bit of a leader on the sidelines. I try and make sure that everyone on the bench is staying engaged because I know how hard it can be to stay locked in games when you're not playing all the time. So giving everybody on the sideline knuckle is just making sure that they're locked in and they're with us because we need all 14 guys to win games in the ACC.
You've been in uniform the last couple of practices. It's been nice to see you out there on the floor after not being there at the beginning of the year. I want to know an update from you. Where do you stand with your health and how are things feeling as you get back on the floor a little bit?
Things have been feeling great. These past couple weeks, we haven't had any setbacks. I've been able to put some consecutive days together, which has been a really big step for me. What the stuff that I've been going through with my knee is kind of unprecedented for most of us, so we just deal with things as they come, and one day I'll get cleared and that'll be that.
One thing I want to ask, because we've talked about it in the past individually about what it's been like to go through some of these injuries. That was prior to another injury you've had. I just want to know from your standpoint, what's the toughest part about going through the injury circumstances you have the last couple seasons?
I would say the toughest part is just kind of thinking, you get in that mindset that like you're letting your teammates and your coaches down. That's probably been the hardest thing for me, but I mean, I couldn't ask for a better group of guys, a better coaching staff. I know that no matter what happens, they're gonna have my back and I have theirs, so.
I know you haven't played as much as you'd want in your career to this point, but I just want to know, now that you've been at Notre Dame, this is your 4th year on campus, just what has the impact of this place been on you?
I can't even state it. I mean, I say it all the time. I think that Notre Dame has really shaped me into a much better person than I was prior to being here. I think I've learned and grown and just become an all-around nicer person.
Robby, appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
When we come back, we'll look ahead at Notre Dame's upcoming games on this week's edition of Inside Notre Dame Men's Basketball, presented by TireRack.com. Welcome back to Inside Notre Dame Men's Basketball, presented by TireRack.com. It's now time to wrap up this week's show. Coach, you got another big road trip coming up. You're going down to Clemson for a game, and then you get a chance for some revenge back here at home against Boston College. What's the key going to be going into this next week?
Well, I think our guys like playing on the road, so they're going to be excited about playing in an ACC road atmosphere at Clemson, a team that's really gifted offensively that we did a good job defending first game. And by the time BC gets here, we certainly have some memories of early December, which was, quite frankly, a low point for us. We really reacted. We're a lot different than we were that night, but let's see if we can get them.
We've talked about it throughout the show a bunch, but I just wanted to talk about it again. You guys are 10-3. You're at the top of the conference. You are in the mix for the regular season title in the ACC. As a coach, just how much fun is this right now?
I'm really enjoying being around this group and seeing how they've grown, how they've led, how they've taken ownership of themselves to chase this. Again, as young guys, we invested in them, and to win a regular season title with this group may be one of the most gratifying things in my coaching career to watch them do it.
Coach, appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week. That does it for this week's edition of Inside Notre Dame Men's Basketball, presented by TireRack.com.